Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm Sam Albanese from the National Weather Service. And the main feature for the state today is a low pressure system in the high Arctic that's been swinging troughs and fronts into the Arctic coast and into the interior with an abundance of cold air associated with that, basically bringing the cold air that is going to make us rapidly go into our fall season. Taking a look at the satellite imagery, we could see what's going on over the North Pacific, which really right now is not a lot. We do have basically a weak trough, weak low pressure area that's off the Kamchatka Peninsula, but basically over the Bering Sea there's high pressure. Now when you take a look up into the Bering Strait region, you can see all these clouds that are coming down associated with that low pressure system up in the high Arctic. And as we take a look at the satellite imagery over the state of Alaska itself, our GOES satellite, here's where you kind of get a better feel for what's going on. Here's this the front or trough associated with the low pressure system that's kind of moving in, the remnants of another one, and then we had our system down here in the Gulf of Alaska. But back up to the Arctic, you can see how these troughs and fronts are kind of swinging down to the northwest Arctic coast, to the Brooks Range, basically bringing a mix of rain and or snow to the North Slope region of the state. Taking a look at the loop one more time. Down in the Gulf, we had the remnants of an area of low pressure just off Prince William Sound with low pressure along the, basically in the northern Gulf of Alaska and off the coast of southeast Alaska. And as you'll see when we talk about our surface map, this was producing rain throughout southeast Alaska as well as some foggy conditions. Same thing along the North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound, generally speaking, was somewhat cloudy, foggy, but otherwise no real precipitation was being seen there, and that was mainly in that southeast part of the sound. If you move to the northwest, much better conditions there. You can see this cloud band associated with this warm front that's extending into the eastern interior, that Copper River Basin region. Basically just clouds in this situation. There was some precipitation in the mountains. Same thing across the interior. We had basically some scattered showers in the remnants of a trough that had previously gone through. Even though it's under the surface high pressure ridge, aloft it's not. We up into the Brooks Range, the higher elevation locations, we're seeing some snow showers, where in the lower elevations, as you move on down towards the Seward Peninsula, rain showers. Up along the Arctic coast, a mixture of rain and fog was occurring there. And as we're going to see in the overnight hours, we're expecting some snow to mix in with that. In the Bering Sea, basically some very benign weather in the Bering Sea, ridge of high pressure. Generally cloudy conditions don't really show up in the satellite image, but cloudy conditions throughout much of the Aleutian Islands and light winds. Take a look at the forecast now for tonight. Here's our low pressure in the North Gulf Coast, low pressure in southeast Alaska. This system over here by Cordova basically is kind of sitting in place and dissipating, not much of a consequence. Maybe some showers over in the Yakutat area. Now down in southeast Alaska, expect rain throughout the Panhandle to be changing over to showers overnight. We have some areas of clearing that we're expecting basically as the low pressure in the Gulf pushes south. You have this ridging in the interior, basically over the Cook Inlet region, up into the Susitna Valley, as well as on up into the Tanana Valley and the eastern portions of the upper Yukon Valley. clear cold conditions are what you can expect tonight. In fact, up in the Fairbanks area, you should continue to see temperatures dropping down below freezing. Same thing in the Copper River Basin. Probably likely to see your temperatures dropping below freezing in some isolated pockets. Now up into the Arctic region, here's our low pressure system with the front extending down through northwestern Alaska. Expect basically rain along this frontal boundary with fog, and overnight hours expect some snow to be mixed in with that, and especially towards the morning. Towards Barrow, a mixture of rain and snow. There's a chance that you may see some rain or snow over the eastern Arctic coast, but generally bank on generally cloudy conditions. Southwestern Alaska, generally mostly cloudy conditions. The Alaska Peninsula, clear, cool conditions can be anticipated for tonight, with breaks in the clouds and mostly cloudy to partly cloudy conditions out along the Aleutian Islands. In the Pribilof Islands, expect things to remain generally cloudy there. Taking a look at the forecast for Monday, in southeast Alaska with this residual trough of low pressure, some showery activity can be expected there. Along the Copper River Basin in the eastern interior across the Cook Inlet region, Kenai Peninsula, as well as down to Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula. Expect sunny conditions for your Labor Day during the day tomorrow. The remainder of the state, low pressure up in the high Arctic. The frontal boundary comes down to yet another low pressure system inland from the Kotzebue area. The cold front extends down through Norton Sound. Expect some rain and snow just off the coast of the Arctic coast, but that in the morning hours, expect that snow to be mixed in, and then again in the evening hours, the majority of the day generally expect some rainy conditions. Rainy conditions over the western interior, right down to the Yukon and Kuskokwim River valleys, as even down to the Killbuck Mountains and down towards Dillingham. You can expect widespread areas of rain along this frontal boundary, even on the north side of it over the Seward Peninsula and Kotzebue Sound. Rainy, foggy conditions are what we're anticipating there. Out in the Bering Sea and the Aleutian Islands, a continuation of mostly cloudy conditions is what we're expecting for Labor Day. By Tuesday, low pressure, this is another low pressure system that's basically caught up in a large area of low pressure up over the high Arctic, and it keeps spinning these low pressure systems and areas of energy down into northwestern Alaska. This one's going to be bringing some rain or snow mixed to the northwest Arctic coast during the day Tuesday, right on up to Barrow. Eastern Arctic coast, expect conditions to remain generally cloudy. Across the interior, some scattered shower activity in the post-frontal air mass, somewhat unstable over the interior. Generally just scattered showers are what we're expecting there. Showers pushing through the Copper River Basin. Down in southeast Alaska, mostly cloudy conditions are what's on tap for you there. Same thing for Kodiak Island. Actually, Kodiak Island, generally sunny conditions again, even on Tuesday. The Alaska Peninsula will cloud over, breaks in the clouds over the central Aleutians, but generally over the Bering Sea. Even though it's high pressure, typically in the Bering Sea with high pressure, you tend to hold on to your clouds over that region and even have some fog conditions. Taking a look now at temperatures around the state this afternoon. Southeast Alaska, mid-50s throughout the Panhandle, right on into the south central region. Temperatures generally in the 50s to low 60s as we get on down to the southern Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Eastern interior generally in the 40s to low 50s are what we were seeing there. Also in the Susitna Valley, upper 50s. Taking a look at the northern portion of the state up along the Arctic coast, upper 30s to low to mid 40s. Same thing along the Brooks Range, temperatures generally in the 30s and 40s, mid 40s over the central interior. As we move on over towards Norton Sound and the southwest portion of the state, the Yukon-Kuskokwim River Delta, temperatures generally in the low to mid 50s there. And then taking a look at southwestern Alaska, Bristol Bay, temperatures in the mid to upper 50s there. Same thing for the Alaska Peninsula, mid 50s over the Pribilof Islands to the Dutch Harbor area, as well as out towards Atka and Adak and Shemya. Temperatures were up to 53 today. Lows for tonight, temperatures expected to be in the upper 40s to low 50s in southeast Alaska, 40s throughout the south central region with some pockets of colder air dropping down to the freezing mark, especially in the Copper River Basin and the eastern interior in the Tanana Valley, upper Yukon Valley. Freezing temperatures up along that the Brooks Range, Arctic coast at or near freezing for many locations across the Arctic coast. And as we come down to the Seward Peninsula and the Bering Sea coastal areas, 40s to right around 50 are what you can expect in those regions. Low 50s, upper 40s over the Alaska Peninsula as well as the eastern Aleutian Islands. Low temperatures tonight right around 50 for the Pribilof Islands as well as out across the Aleutian Islands. Highs for tomorrow, expect temperatures to be in the upper 50s to near 60 throughout southeast Alaska. Same thing along the North Gulf Coast, upper 50s to near 60. Eastern interior, mid 50s, 40s along the Brooks Range, 30s and 40s up along the Arctic coast, 40s and 50s as we come on down to the Seward Peninsula, with 50s across southwestern Alaska and the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, even down to Bristol Bay in the upper 50s, 50s to low 60s over the Alaska Peninsula, mid 50s over the Pribilof Islands as well as the Aleutian Islands, and mid to low 50s over the remainder of the Aleutian Islands. Taking a look now at our flying weather, some marginal conditions can be expected throughout southeast Alaska tomorrow to the extreme eastern portion of the Copper River Basin. Marginal to IFR conditions up along the Arctic coast, right on down through the western interior to the Seward Peninsula, right on down to the Bristol Bay region. Even over the Alaska Peninsula, you may see some areas of marginal conditions there. Marginal to IFR along the Bering Sea coast, St. Lawrence Island, down into the Pribilof Islands, as well as much of the Aleutian Islands. And again, even though there's high pressure there, low clouds and fog tend to prevail underneath a Bering Sea high. Taking a look at our passes for tomorrow, expect IFR conditions for Anaktuvik as well as Adigan Pass. Down to the Alaska Range, marginal conditions initially with IFR conditions by late in the afternoon, and that's primarily because of the weather that we're going to be seeing on the west side of the Alaska Range. Same thing as we move on up to Rainy Path, marginal to IFR conditions predominantly on the west side of the path. Windy Path looks like they're going to avoid the poor conditions at least for another day, staying VFR there. VFR for Isabel Pass as well as Mentasta Pass. Down to the Chugach Mountains, Tonita Pass expected to be VFR as well as Portage Pass. Then down into southeast Alaska, marginal conditions can be expected for both Chilkoot and White Pass. Taking a look at our freezing levels. Freezing levels basically at the surface over the northwest Arctic coast, with warm air aloft over basically the central Arctic coast to eastern Arctic coast to 2,000 feet. Freezing levels sloping up to about 4,000 to 5,000 feet over the interior to 8,000 feet over the Kenai Peninsula, 10,000 feet as we get on down towards the Alaska Peninsula, and 12,000 feet out into the Aleutian Islands. What does that mean for our icing? Expect some occasional moderate mixed icing basically across the interior down along the Yukon River Valley from your freezing level to 14,000 feet, right along where that frontal boundary is going to be. Isolated moderate rime icing, freezing level to 12,000 feet behind that front. Isolated moderate rime icing from your freezing level to 18,000 feet over the Kuskokwim Delta as well as the Kilbuck Mountains north of the Dillingham area. Taking a look now at our jet stream for tomorrow. Basically, we have a split jet stream, one coming off the Asian mainland and one coming from the northern portions of Japan, and expect about 100 knot jet south of the Aleutian Islands, going across the northern Bering Sea 55 knots, and accelerating to 85 knots there. Then the jet streams come together basically over the Gulf of Alaska, 60 to 65 knots, and then they finally make landfall over the Vancouver Island area at about 115 knots. By tomorrow, the 9,000 foot winds, expect about 20 to 30 knot winds up along the Arctic coast north of the Brooks Range, 30 to 40 knot winds south of the Brooks Range. Same thing as we come across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, right on across the Alaska Range, across the south central region, the Gulf of Alaska, and into southeast Alaska at about 40 knots. 15 knot winds over the Alaska Peninsula, that was southeast Alaska there. 25 knot winds across the central Bering Sea, but light winds over the Aleutian Islands underneath that ridge of high pressure. Taking a look down at that 3,000 foot level, up along the Arctic regions, you can see the circulation around the low pressure system up there, about 15 to 20 knot winds at that 3,000 foot level coming around that low pressure system. Down towards the Brooks Range, you get more of that zonal flow associated with the jet stream aloft, getting winds at about 25 to 35 knots coming into Norton Sound, as well as the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, 20 to 30 knots over the interior, tapering off to about 10 knots as you get towards the Alcan border. 20 knot winds coming across the Gulf of Alaska into southeast Alaska in that flow. Taking a look at the Bering Sea, about 20 to 25 knot winds across the central Bering Sea to the eastern Bering Sea, dropping off to 15 knots over the Alaska Peninsula, with basically 15 knot winds or less over the western Aleutian Islands, 25 knot winds into the western Bering Sea. South of the Aleutian Islands, you can see the circulation around the high pressure ridge, 10 to 15 knot winds coming around from the east across that area, the low pressure south of that area. And then that takes us to our turbulence map. Expect some occasional moderate turbulence basically across much of the interior, right on down to Bristol Bay and the eastern Alaska Peninsula in the areas where there was some stronger wind. And that wraps up this portion of the show. Enjoy the segment and come back for the marine forecast.
Hello, my name is Don Lee, Chief Pilot of Talkeetna Air Service. Today we're going to go over some special ski operations up in the mountains, up in the base of Mount McKinley. We landed on the southeast fork of the Hoeppner Glacier. We'll be going over some points on your skis, maintenance, things to watch for in these winter conditions. Our skis really take a beating and we use them a lot, and these are things that we've just learned through the years, some special tips that might, I hope to help you folks watch for and to prevent any problems in the future. First, generally, I go around and I check anything outside, anything that looks different, anything loose hanging down or any cables. Later, we'll come back and do a more specific check on your skis. But on my initial pre-flight, I usually just walk by, give everything just a good shake, look for any wrinkles in the skin. Nobody's backed their car up into it or something overnight or anything else like that. Looking at the base of your landing gear, there's no wrinkles here, there's no loose hydraulic lines hanging down or no red stains on the ground or anything, just a general check, everything looks straight. All the way to your leading edge. No frost or ice chunks on the very leading edge or anything like that. Look for clean, smooth surfaces. Know your fuel vents open. Counterbalances are in, the hinges all have their pins, the push rod is there and loose. We'll come all the way to the flaps. And we're just checking the flaps for free, easy movement. Push rod is in good shape. Now I'll just go over some of the finer points on checking your ski rigging out. The skis, because of the snow conditions and hard runways and the abuse they take, sometimes they're neglected, and it's real important to check your rigging real close. And if your rigging is old or you don't know how long it's been since it's been replaced or the bolts, it's a good idea just to throw out the old and put new stuff on. It's a good safety factor that we do every 100 hours on our aircraft. Okay, you looked at your rigging is tight, that of course for any obvious missing bolts or anything like that, that your cable's in good shape, that it's not frayed. In this particular model, the cable works in this housing here. Your hydraulic lines are tight. There's no red stains on the snow or on the ground. Everything's tied up tight. You look, especially, there's 4 bolts in here on the Cessna model that's particular, that you want to be sure that there are no cracks that you can see from the outside, that there's no that the bolts are all on and that they're tight. And by wiggling the ski in the airplane, you can see that. There is a certain amount of play that has to be there. This arm has, whenever the airplane is in the snow, you have a tremendous leverage with the tail. And if you get 1 or 2 people pushing on it, you can oftentimes twist the ski because of the tremendous leverage moment on that. And you want to make sure your arm is in good shape, that it's not bent and that it's not cracked anywhere. Underneath, look, make sure that your plexiglass isn't wore away, that there's no jagged holes in it or spots, that your skegs are still in good shape. There's nothing obstructing the bottom. That your main rigging, that your spring still has some spring left in it. Your cables are all hooked up. Then again, no frayed cables, or all the bolts are all tight and solid. This cable here also, that no frizzies. It's connected well. There's no sign of fatigue or anything like that. Okay, when you fuel your airplane, especially in the winter, with nylon snowsuits and wool mixed, you have a high possibility of static electricity. And it's important to be sure, and if you don't have a physical ground wire to actually ground your aircraft, come and touch a metal point to block and ground any static electricity. One little thing to live by is know exactly what you got in the tanks. Not to just say your gauges. Man, oh man, you'll have a surprise someday. Okay, we're all set. Oil's okay, gas is sumped, hydraulic reservoir is full. Now that your pre-flight's complete, it's a good idea to go and get a weather briefing from your local flight service station. In this country, it's real important. How's it going, Dick?
Pretty good, Don. How you doing this morning?
Yeah, good. Heading up to the hill today, Southeast Fork. What do you got for weather up in that area?
Well, basically, we've got a pretty well entrenched high-pressure system over Siberia. It's keeping the lows pretty well south of us along the chain in the peninsula. We'll probably be on the fringe area up here of some middle and high clouds, 12,000 scattered with high thin cirrus. Lower clouds and possibly some light precipitation in the southern Susitna Valley, but I don't expect any up in the northern valley or along the range today.
Okay. All right, real good. Thanks, Dick, and we'll file a flight plan.
Okay.
Welcome back, and we'll get to the marine forecast. Boy, seeing that surface map in that segment really brought back some memories for me from way back when. Anyway, southeast Alaska for Monday. Expect your winds to be out of the southeast around 20 knots and 10 knots in the southern to central inside waters. These winds in the southern waters will be turning around out of the west-northwest, and these winds in the central part of the southeast Alaska will become light and variable, about 15 knots down in the southern panhandle by late in the afternoon to early evening. North winds 20 knots up through Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. Off the coast, expect your winds out of the west about 20 to 25 knots, and then over the east Gulf Coast, west winds at 15 knots. Taking a look at the area for Tuesday, expect your winds to be again northwest 20 knots. They'll be northwest, increasing to 20 knots in the southern panhandle, variable to 10 knots in the central panhandle inner waters, with 25 knot winds out of the south through Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. West winds 20 knots along the entirety of the outer waters for southeast Alaska from the east Gulf Coast right on down towards the Dixon Entrance region. Taking a look at the forecast for Monday for the south central region, northwest winds 20 knots out of Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast. West winds to northwest winds 30 knots for the east of the Barren Islands and south of Seward, with some gale force winds over the Augustine Island area. Southwest winds 20 to 25 knots up Cook Inlet. Across Kodiak Island, west to northwest winds 25 knots. And this is the forecast for Tuesday. Just forgot to change the label on this. Winds becoming light and variable on Prince William Sound. West to southwest winds along the North Gulf Coast to the east of the Barren Islands, around 25 knots. 25 knot winds around Kodiak Island out of the southwest. West winds across the Augustine Island area with southwest winds 15 to 20 knots up Cook Inlet. Taking a look at the Alaska Peninsula for Monday, expect your winds to be out of the west at 20 to 25 knots on the north side of the peninsula. Variable winds south of the Alaska Peninsula at 10 knots to northwest winds 20 knots south of the eastern Alaska Peninsula. Tuesday, expect your winds to be generally light and variable on the south side of the peninsula to some southwesterly component around 15 knots. West winds 15 knots north of the Alaska Peninsula to 20 knots in the Bristol Bay area. For the Aleutian Islands on Monday, expect your winds basically to be light and variable, 10 to 15 knots or less over the eastern Aleutian Islands to the central Aleutian Islands, to south winds around 10 knots or less over the central to western Aleutian Islands. For Tuesday, expect your winds to be, again, light and variable over the eastern Aleutian Islands to central Aleutian Islands, around 10 to 15 knots or less. Same thing, no change in conditions over the central and western Aleutian Islands, south winds 10 knots. For the Bering Sea coastal waters, west winds 25 knots across the Pribilof Islands, west winds 30 knots to southwesterly winds from St. Matthew Island to the Nunivak Island waters, and west winds 25 knots in the St. Lawrence Island region. Tuesday, winds are going to be dropping off a bit, 10 to 15 knots out of the west from St. Lawrence Island down to St. Matthew Island and the Pribilof Islands, 15 to 20 knot winds around the Nunivak Island waters out of the west. For our Arctic coastal waters on Monday, expect your winds to be out of the northwest about 20 knots outside of Kotzebue Sound to 15 knots as we round the corner towards Barrow, then southwest to south winds 20 to 25 knots as we move on over towards the Dead Horse Kaktovik area. On Tuesday, expect your winds to be out of the west at about 25 to 30 knots outside of Kotzebue Sound to Cape Lisburne, and 25 knots as we get on up towards Wainwright. Southwest winds 20 knots off Barrow as well as Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse to 15 knot winds out of the west as we get on over towards the eastern Arctic coastal waters there by Kaktovik. For a quick recap for tonight, expect your clear cold conditions again across the eastern interior down into the south central region. Rainy conditions in southeast Alaska with some showers off the coast. Clear, cool conditions across the Alaska Peninsula. The big feature is this front that's rolling in across the northwest Arctic coast and the Seward Peninsula. Rain can be expected with that. Snow at higher elevation, a mixture of rain and snow in the Barrow area, and generally rather benign conditions under high pressure over the majority of the Bering Sea and the Aleutian Islands. Monday, our front continues to push across the Arctic coastal region with low pressure in the western interior. Cold front digs on down towards the Norton Sound region. Rain can be expected across the majority of the area for Labor Day over western Alaska, and a mixture of rain and snow up along the Arctic coast. We're about out of time for the show this evening. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.